Joining me right now, Joan McCarter, senior political writer for Daily Kos. Earlier this week, Rick Scott, the Florida senator, laid out a vision for America if the Republican Party takes control of the Senate. His Rescue America plan, it is an 11-point plan of total insanity that should motivate people to get out and vote. And we have a lot to get into regarding that and much more. Welcome back to the program, Joan.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So, yeah, I wanted to jump right in to this Rick Scott plan. You wrote about it. His 11-point plan is beyond radical and terrifying in its embrace of white supremacist, eliminationist principles and policy. It is also ridiculous. Talk a little bit about this 11-point plan, which, of course, without a Republican president, they're not going to get passed. But, well, we should worry about the future, I guess. Talk a little bit about it.
It's really pretty terrifying stuff. I mean, it is ridiculous. It's laugh-worthy, except that this is really the only agenda we've seen from Republicans so far. And his intro to it is enough to sort of tell you what you're in for. He says we have to defeat the quote-unquote militant left, which would be us, I guess. Because we want to destroy American history, patriotism, border security, the nuclear family, gender, traditional morality, capitalism, fiscal responsibility, opportunity, rugged individualism, Judeo-Christian values, dissent, free speech, colorblindness, law enforcement, religious liberty, parental involvement in public schools, and private ownership of firearms. So that litany kind of gives you a sense of what you're in for, but the rhetoric behind it is serious and scary stuff. It's eliminationist, it's white supremacist, it's totalitarian. I mean, really, it's a recipe for fascism. It's what the 2022 GOP is all about.
And you know that you point out that Mitch McConnell, who is the Senate Minority Leader, has been very quiet when he's asked about his plans if the Republicans take back the Senate. Having watched the Senate and know how things operate, how common is it that if the Senate leader isn't saying anything, that one senator puts out the plan that Republicans must follow, and this 11-point plan, no less? Could it irk McConnell a little bit?
Oh, I think it's irked McConnell a lot, which is sort of the bright side to it. Anything that gives Mitch McConnell ulcers is fine by me. He wants to make this a referendum on Biden. He sees, don't rock the boat too much. Look at the fact that we've got inflation, that COVID still exists. There are all these things that people are bothered about right now and are taking it out on Biden, and just stick with that. Don't scare anybody. And Rick Scott didn't want to listen to that. So Rick Scott, who is the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, just decided he's going to put out his manifesto. Now, this could be the kind of plan that he is trying to get all of his potential Republican Senate candidates to agree to, or those running for re-election, whereas McConnell's really trying hard not to let the Trumpy, MAGA, fascist types rule. So it does put them in direct opposition. I don't know how much McConnell's going to be able to rein this in. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next several months.
Right,
how
because
this plays out.
He is representing the base, the Trumpy base of the party. Now, Scott spoke with Sean Hannity last night, claiming there's no rise in taxes in the plan. I want to play the clip and get your reaction. Clip number 9.
Chucky Schumer saying that your plan is to raise taxes on more than half of Americans. I didn't see that in your plan. Did you have that in your plan? Was it in invisible ink in the copy that I got? Because I didn't see that.
No. Chuck Schumer, who wants to raise taxes for everything, while when I was governor, I cut taxes and fees 100 times. We're the opposite.
Chucky Schumer saying that your plan is.
So what was your thought on that? Because he's actually talking about something Mitt Romney brought up, which during his run for president in 2020 might have even killed his campaign, the 47%. Talk a little bit about that.
Right. It's the 47% or 50%, whatever it is, of people who make too little to actually end up needing to pay taxes. Either they don't meet the income threshold for needing to pay income taxes to the federal government, or they're getting enough back in tax credits, the child tax credit or the earned income tax credit, that they don't have a liability. So it's working families, it's retirees, it's disabled people. And yeah, Rick Scott's plan says that they will end up having to have taxes. He says all Americans should pay some income tax to have skin in the game, even if a small amount.
Right. So that was just a complete lie right there. That they weren't raising taxes, right? They are raising taxes. They are
raising taxes. And an important thing to remember is that these people are, they have skin in the game, as he likes to say it. I hate that phrase. They're paying, sales taxes where they live. They're paying gas taxes. They are probably paying income taxes in their states. There's no way these people are completely immune from having to pay taxes, from having to give back to society in whatever way. And what is really interesting, though, is that it's not just a tax hike on all Americans, basically. It's a implied tax cut for the super wealthy, because one of the things he sneaks in there is wanting to cut both staff and funding for the IRS by 50%, which means the IRS is not going to be able to claw back taxes from all of those wealthy tax cheats who don't pay, who hire lawyers and accountants to make sure that they don't have to pay taxes. And he's going to make that even easier for them.
And he also, point number 2, is colorblind equity, which basically gets at a lot of the white supremacist kind of ideas in this plan. And this idea that we've seen reverberating throughout the Republican Party and Trump world, and now the Supreme Court may even be taking on the Civil Rights Act as well. Talk a little bit about that and how it gets to where they're speaking to white grievance.
Well, and you need to center it where he centers it. We're all made in the image of God, he says, in saying that we can't divide people by race, skin color, ethnicity, country of origin. What he's saying is that, no, you can't have civil rights legislation that protects minority populations when it comes to voting rights or hiring practices or admission to schools. They like to call it color blindness, but it's really, again, making sure that there are no guardrails on access to all of these things for people of color. For years, they've liked to say, well, we don't see color. We think that society should be colorblind. They've adulterated Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech to try to make that point. What it really means is that we are going to exclude from society, from wealth, from access, everybody who doesn't look like us, everybody who is not centered in our white Christian model of what America should be. And it's kind of interesting that he says all of this while at the same time wants to finish building Trump's border wall and name it for Trump. But no, he's not at all dividing people by race, skin color, or country of origin. It's remarkable that
he
can put all this out there.
I laughed at that one because it was like out of a scene from Billions, where the one of the rich Wall Street titans is wants to get the Olympics contract, and the governor is a narcissist and realizes all he has to do is name the stadium after the governor and he'll get the contract. And I thought, right there, it's like he's, pandering to Trump. Like, Trump will get behind this.
As an aside, what is it exactly that Rick Scott's angling for here? Does he want to be Trump's VP in 2024? Right. Does he want to be Senate Majority Leader? We don't know, but he's definitely angling for something in that.
He also has some pretty, as you call them, wild plans for government. All federal legislation sunsets in 5 years, term limits. Talk a little bit about all of that, because it seems like a jumble.
It is a jumble, and it's bonkers. I mean, there's no way that a government the size and complexity of ours could possibly be conducted this way. It's just completely unrealistic and bizarre. Of course, term limits comes back, but not just term limits for elected officials, term limits for everybody serving in federal government, congressional staff, executive staff, career service, public service employees. All of them have to leave after 12 years, which is, it's a recipe for disaster. And that, with every piece of legislation sunsetting after 5 years, Congress would be ground to a halt trying to reauthorize absolutely every piece of legislation ever made every 5 years. You can't.
Not to mention, it would, unless there were strict, which I doubt there would be, like strict laws around where you go to work after the 12 years. The revolving door would be insane, right? You just have people leaving and going to industry and using every contact and connection, and there'd be more corruption.
A lot more corruption.
I wanted to get your thoughts on how Republicans, senators in particular, have been responding regarding the Ukraine situation and Russia and the invasion. Of course, some of them trying to take, this opportunity to attack the president, calling him weak. And then Trump just comes in and throws this curveball and says it was genius what Putin did, right? And you've got the crowd that agrees with him, and then you've got the other crowd that was banking on, no, Russian aggression is bad, and they're just kind of staying silent. Talk a little bit about what's going on.
They're staying very silent. It's really interesting and kind of bizarre to see this dance that they're trying to do of not pissing off Trump by going anti-Russia, but at the same time knowing that, the rest of the world is looking at Russia doing this and freaking out. And I think that they're probably freaking out a little bit too, but not knowing exactly what to say. So what they have decided is that, A, we're not being strong enough. Biden is being too weak in responding to Putin. But when he is responding, he's doing the right thing, because yes, we absolutely have to have sanctions, but it's not enough. But we can't back Putin. But boy, under Trump, Putin would have tried this. It's a mess. They haven't decided on what tack they're going to take. I did see, and this is kind of interesting, Ted Cruz has had a hold on several State Department, Defense Department nominees over the Nord Stream 2 contract. And now that has been scuttled, he's decided to lift his hold. So that was sort of an interesting move to see Ted Cruz sort of being on Biden's side and appreciating the fact that he put in these sanctions. So I don't think that they've decided how they're going to respond. I think that they're looking at this and looking at public sentiment in the United States that definitely is not pro-Russian, and knowing that they can't come out pro-Putin in this, but also trying not to be pro-Biden in this, having forgotten that maxim that you never criticize the president when you're in conflict overseas.
Right. Oh, that one they just threw out the window completely. But it's one of those where there is no middle. You can't be, I mean, for Trump doesn't accept a middle. You have to be pro-Putin. That's
right.
It.
Right.
And Tucker Carlson, of course, defines everything in terms of where people are supposed to stand. So I'm sure Ted Cruz may get another spanking when he goes back on Tucker Carlson.
I'm sure he will. It's going to be really hard for any Republican to even sound semi-pro-Putin after that speech Putin made, when he made absolutely clear that his goal is imperialism. His goal is bringing back the old gang of Soviet socialist republics and rebuilding that empire. Gave up any pretense at all that this is protecting Russian citizens in the eastern provinces of Ukraine, that there's any kind of defensive move in this. This is all offense, and this is rebuilding the Soviet Union. And it's very scary. It's very scary.
That there's even, and I've been saying it on today's show, like, who would ever imagine we'd be talking about a former president saying this is genius, and that the former president at his first impeachment, and that we'd even be saying there was a first impeachment because there was a second, was at the center of what was happening in this country that's now under attack by Russia. And you can only imagine what would be happening if Trump were still president. God.
Yeah.
You
don't want to go there.
No. Always great to have you on and talk about these important things. Thanks so much for joining us today, Joan.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Joan McCarter, senior political writer at Daily Kos. Follow her at Joan McCarter on Twitter. We're back in a couple of minutes.
This is the Michelangelo Signorile Show on SiriusXM.